This is an example just so you get an idea. You don't have to know what all this data means. I just brought you an example so you could sort of see. But each number represents a different student. And then time and days, they do different activities. We know when they've started, when they've stopped, how many times they've restarted, all different kinds of things. If they replayed a video, if they didn't, if they ever actually picked up the game. We sort of know everything because we do give them their devices. We have 30 devices we have from a grant. And we give them out for a month. With the intention that they, yes, use them as a mobile game for learning Spanish, but also they do whatever else they want to do with them as well, which we find engages them even more so in the mobile devices. I shouldn't say every single, 75% of the devices that came back to us last semester had Facebook on it, which tells us a lot about vernacular literacy and language, right? So it's really, really interesting. This gives you an idea of how learners are responding. I thought it was cool how it was kind of hitting home, not necessarily like literally with me, but like in Albuquerque. So it was a little easier, I guess, to relate to, right? Many students in Albuquerque, I don't know if it's like this here, my guess is probably yes, say, oh my gosh, I have to go abroad so I can actually talk with speakers of Spanish. And we almost fall over saying like, you could go down the street. And that's the exact idea, right? We have these learners who have lived in Albuquerque much longer than I have, who have lived there their whole life, have grown up in schools, have even gone to dual immersion schools, and they still don't feel this connection to Spanish in their community. And that's really also a goal of what we're looking at, in addition to the pragmatics and sort of the intercultural ideas. You also talk to real people. I guess it's knowing the background. The story was still kind of made up, so she recognizes the fiction in it, but there's something that relates to what she's working on. What do we know? One, we see a very clear difference in the perception versus getting others to perceive. So playing the game is one thing, right? The idea that they can successfully get the clues, they can interact, they can make good pragmatic choices, they can do all kinds of things with language when they only have to sort of perceive what's going on. When they're actually asked to create a level, think of the complexity involved in getting learners, this is 4th semester Spanish, I should say, so 202 at our university, getting them to actually create a dialogue where they have to get people to get a personality of a person, right? What kind of language are they using? It's not enough to know the grammar and the words. It's not. You have to know stylistically, and you have to really investigate and think about that. And so that's sort of the next stage. Our results show that really clearly, and so we're working on how to get more and more learners involved in that as part of their curriculum. Also, like, along those same lines, the idea of interaction versus creation. It's one thing to play a game. It's a whole other thing to create that game. And so we're really, really looking at the comparison of the two and what's sort of the cost-benefit analysis ratio of doing what and who should we have do what and how does that fit in. It also goes to the idea of autonomous learning, right? And the idea of where we have different classes and do we split up our Spanish classes? So we have some who do game design and some who do different things, and how might we do that in a program like New Mexico where it's me and 40 graduate students. That's it, right? So what do we do with that? And then the idea of having learners as part of something from the beginning has been extremely powerful. They have said over and over again, thank you for thinking about us as learners. Which is crazy, right? It's almost disheartening, like, what? How is this not happening for you? But the idea that they feel really engaged in actually having someone care about a new type of curriculum for them. And they get very, very excited about it and get very involved. Not all learners, of course, right? I'm talking sort of in general. Some are like, oh my gosh, do I actually have to go there? Also using language for something real, in the sense that, yes, this is a fictional game, but going to that community feels very real. There's a guy there who's in our game who also, he's the only person who's in our game and in the neighborhood. His name's Joe. He makes sausages on the street every Saturday. When our students go there, they get free sausage. They hang out with Joe. They do all kinds of things. He's a great guy. And all of a sudden it feels like, whoa, this actually really does mean something to me, right? And then one girl happened to live right down the street. And she's like, let's go see my house. Let's do this. And so it's really neat to see them doing that. And finally, the idea that we have a lot of potential for interdisciplinary academic and social endeavors. Chris is actually a professor in the Honors College at UNM. He's a mathematician by trade. He's not a language person. But the idea of getting his students involved with the Spanish students and doing some really interesting work, having someone do graphic art and having them do language, and students are getting really, really excited about that. And so that's the direction sort of that we're going, and that our data is pointing us in any way. I should say one other thing about the importance of mobile learning games for place and understanding the context of place in and of itself. The same would be true of study abroad, right? We have students who go abroad and come back and they feel very connected to the place, or they don't sometimes, and it just sort of depends on what's going on. But our learners in this case, I am not kidding, maybe 90% of them were like, I am not going on that field trip. How do I get out of that? I'm not leaving this university campus. I'm not going out of my comfort zone. No one complained once they were there, and most of them stayed much longer than we expected. So there is something about sort of pushing them that we're excited about, regardless of how they sort of push back at the beginning. And the game itself is just the medium for sort of making this happen. Then vernacular games, and this is a project or commercial off the shelves. This actually comes from some work that John and I are doing together. We call them vernacular because they're everyday sort of speech game type things. And I brought you this trailer. I'm sure everyone knows what it's from. The #1 selling massively multiplayer online game. You'll see there are lots of others that we'll talk about. The ad.
4 years have passed since the mortal races banded together and stood united against the might of the Burning Legion. Though Azeroth was saved, the tenuous pact between the Horde and the Alliance has all but evaporated. Drums of war thunder once again.
Stop it there. It's basically more of the same. But what is it about World of Warcraft? Has anyone in here besides John played World of Warcraft?
In his class.
In his class. All right, there you go. It's an extremely interesting context. We actually played about 2 years ago now. A group of us interested in this type of scholarship decided, well, we better play. If we're going to talk about these things, if we're going to actually use them for pedagogy. It was my first massively multiplayer online gaming experience. I have to say it was a lot of fun. Nothing actually really dies if you're worried about sort of the violence and those kinds of things. Nothing actually dies. Everything comes back to life in Azeroth. But what's most interesting is the type of interaction that happens sort of around this game. And this is what we're sort of thinking about in terms of pragmatics. This is some data that I'm going to show you. We're just starting to work with it. I'm working on a paper with Steve Thorne right now looking at these sort of attendant discourses from our interactions. And if you look at this from a pragmatics perspective, right, the idea that you need to do things with language well. First, excellent job, everyone. No kidding. Only 1 death, for which I take full blame. That came after the instance was completed. Truly super work. And I'm sure John's thinking about, oh, I know when we did this. I know which one, right? You have an idea. So, but basically, what are they doing here? Praising, right? Guess what's coming next? I bet you can guess. However, right? But this technique of giving praise at the beginning is very, very kind of American English type of pragmatics, right? I have to praise what's going on. My native Spanish speakers look at this and say, do I have to do this? Are you kidding me? right? It doesn't feel sort of natural in many dialects, not all, of course, of Spanish. Then he goes on, as these characters and myself spoke last night, these higher level instances require some drastically altering your normal play style. The absolute worst instance groups I've run with are those with everyone tries to play just like they do solo. So in an instance, you each have to take on a specific role in order to overcome some epic win, right? Inevitably, these lead to wipe after wipe, death after death, where the whole group dies. For those of you who do not routinely do instance runs, again, mitigating what I'm going to say right now, this transition can be hard. Habit is a strong force. I think last night the group came together very quickly and overall adjusted to its roles very nicely. So we did okay. Nice work, Bob. We need to think about this. We did have some leniency, however, right? Careful. If we do this again, it might not quite work. Because of this character's high level armor that we would have lacked had the healer been, say, a 46. So in this case, the healer was a much higher level, helped everyone, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to offer only a few suggestions and comments, and I hope that others share ideas for improvement as well. If you just think about the pragmatics of that particular statement, take out your ideas about games, take out your ideas about what they're actually talking about. Being able to do this with language is a highly difficult skill. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do in terms of pedagogy, is simulate and actually create these types of experiences for learners, where they care about using language well and they understand that it needs to happen in those ways. I need to be able to sort of mitigate what's going on. Or if I'm learning a different language, I need to know how to express deference and politeness and do different things. So in order to do this and sort of along these lines, the project that we're working on here through CERCLL is looking really at vernacular and off-the-shelf commercial games in terms of literacy and in terms of games as cultural products. And how do we, one, help instructors and teachers use this in a way to be able to do something with kind of off the shelf, right? I'm under no illusion that all of you are going to go out and design games, right? You don't want to build and build and build and build. You want something you can use tomorrow. So how can we help you access those materials, review games, make choices about what's going on, and also be able to sort of change pedagogy, whether you choose to use games or not. And really that's what we're working on. We've just started that project. It's a 4-year grant cycle, so I can't really tell you much other than here's our blog. And this is what we're working on. So anyone who's interested in sort of working in that area, we're doing game reviews, we're doing lots of neat, fun things, hopefully moving forward. So what does all of this mean? Each of these 3 projects are really, really different, look at really, really different aspects. I come at it, of course, from the perspective that what I care most about is my learners are able to interact well with other people. That's the goal, not to use games. But I find games extremely powerful for doing the kinds of things they need to do.